Good morning. That is always a tough act to follow, but I'm delighted to be here this morning. My name is Lynn. I've been part of this community for shockingly more than 20 years now, and it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces out in the audience and new ones in this vibrant, growing church. Just wonderful to be a part of it. So I'm glad this morning to be here to share a reading with you. And probably as you will feel the same, I also look forward to Nick helping us unpack this. So a reading this morning from John, chapter 5, verses 1 to 10. Soon another feast came around, and Jesus was back in Jerusalem. Near the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there was a pool, in Hebrew called Bethesda, with 5 alcoves. Hundreds of sick people, blind, crippled, paralyzed, were in these alcoves. One man had been an invalid there for 38 years. When Jesus saw him stretched out by the pool and knew how long he had been there, he said, "Do you want to get well?" The sick man said, "Sir, when the water is stirred, I don't have anybody to put me in the pool. By the time I get there, somebody else is already in." Jesus said, "Get up, take your bedroll, start walking." The man was healed on the spot. He picked up his bedroll and walked off. That day happened to be the Sabbath. The religious leaders stopped the healed man and said, "It's the Sabbath. You can't carry your bedroll around. It's against the rules." Thanks be to God.
Thanks, Lynn. God be with you. We still doing all right? Yeah. Audrey's still doing all right? She is. Great. All right. So, as it might be evident, we are stepping into a new sermon series here at the church that, in theory, will take us right into Advent. And last night, I was walking Lewis, and I was like, reevaluating my life choices and thinking to myself, like, do I want to do this whole series? You committed to it months ago, and now that it's here, maybe we won't do this. Maybe you'll pull an audible and you'll change it all up. And I started thinking about, why do we do sermon series like this in the first place? Because there's all kinds of easier ways to do this. Like, we could just go from one thing to the next thing and the next thing. Why don't we do that? Why do we stick with exploring big, central, core themes, questions, and ideas? And as I walked him around the block, I kept coming back to this one thing. And I want to share it with you because I think it actually was helpful to me, and maybe it'll be helpful to you. And it reminds us of something really important about our faith and spirituality, something that we often get so wrong. And it's a really important truth I want to kind of hold on to as we head into, especially this series, but anything that we do here as a church. And that truth is this: faith isn't something that you master. Faith is something that you practice. It's not something that you master. It is something that you practice. When we talk about faith and spirituality, we're talking about less of something that you have and more about something that you do. We're talking less about the beliefs and doctrines that we have and more about a trust that we have. That's what we're talking about when we talk about faith. It's trusting that there is this something bigger than ourselves out there, and we call it God here in the church. And it's there and being trusting with God, being connected to this God, being caught up with this God, and surrendering to this Spirit. It's there that we learn what it means to be truly human and alive in the world. It's there that we discover what is right and true and good. It's there we find the kind of life that we're in here looking for. This life we're kind of wired to have. This life that hums with reverence. This life that's connected with God, each other, and ourselves. This life that by no means is free from pain and suffering, but a life that has a depth to it. This life that feels right. This life that expands and grows and transcends all of those things to be what we would call holy. This life that we know we're meant to have. This life that transforms us so we can go out and transform the world. And I think that's why ultimately we do things like this. It's a chance to practice that. It's a chance to get lost in some really big and important questions and not show up here looking for the answers, but show up here looking for maybe better questions. It's to show up here looking for conversation partners. It's to show up here and begin to do that work of trust, of growth, of exploring and building the kind of life that we're meant to have, knowing that we don't find that life by finding answers, but we find that life by asking the right questions and actually living it out. And the series that we're entering into today, hopefully, knock on some wood, will help us do just that. I called it, "Who do you say that I am?" Because that's one of the questions that Jesus would always ask the disciples again and again, like, well, who do you say that I am? And if you look at the different answers Jesus got throughout his ministry, he got all kinds of answers to that. People saw him in all kinds of really important ways that we kind of just shrug off and say, no, but he's the Christ. We're like, yeah, but he's also all of these things. And when we look at all of these things, Jesus as a healer, as a friend, as a rebel, as a prophet, as a guide, we actually tap into seeing him as all of these things, then we can actually go over here and say, oh, that's why we call him the Christ. That's why we call him the way to God. That's why we see his way as the way to life through all of these different things. And so each week, the plan is we're going to look at different personas, different parts of who Jesus is. And then by the end of it, we can kind of Voltron them all together and we can see why Jesus is our guy and why he is so important. And maybe we can understand then a bit more about who God is, and then we can understand a bit more about who we are. Are you with me? So far, that makes sense? Okay, good. So, Jesus the healer. And now, we read that story, but we could have read like a dozen other stories. When it comes to the stories about Jesus, there are so many stories. And I kind of say it that way because like every other time he's healing somebody, it's one of the main things that he does. He's always going around healing people. And now I have not done the math on this by any way, shape, or form, but I am pretty sure that if you did the math, Jesus would always be doing one of three things. He would always be teaching, he'd always be eating, and he'd always be healing. Those are the main things that he does. He's always teaching people about who God is and what it means to be human and how we can grow. He's always just hanging out with people, having a drink and eating some food. And he is always out there healing people. Healing people who can't see, people who are sick, people who are hurt, or, like this story, people who can't walk. And all these healings are actually one of the reasons that he gained so much attention, because who doesn't want to be healed? And as more and more people talked about him, the more and more people who followed him, and they would not leave him alone. There's always crowds desperate for healing, desperate for new life. And if we fast forward enough in the story, it's also one of the reasons that he got killed. Because for an empire, however you want to define it, hope is the last thing they want to happen. And all these people wanting hope, all these people living with hope, all these people thinking, oh, there could be so much more. No, they weren't having any of that. And all because Jesus would just go around and heal people. And the story we have today, it's one that we've looked at before. And it shows this Jesus, the healer, in action. And we don't have very many details, but the story is so fascinating and intriguing. Because Jesus, he's in Jerusalem. He's out getting a shawarma or something. We don't know what he's doing. He's going for a walk. He would totally eat shawarma. Or falafel, maybe. Anyways, we're not going down that road. Focus. The important thing is, he sees a man lying down on a mat. And the man has been there for 38 years. 38 years of being beside this pool. And the general idea at the time was occasionally the pool would get stirred or bubble up. And that was your chance to get in. And then miraculously, whoever got in first would be healed. And so all those hundreds of people, they're just waiting. But the man can't walk, so he has no chance of getting in. But it's a competition to get in, so no one's going to help him. And 38 years, he's just there, laying, waiting, hoping that maybe one day he'll have his chance to get in. And we're told that Jesus is out for his walk, and he sees the man, which I think is just such a beautiful detail, that Jesus saw him. And he walks right up to the guy. He lets himself be interrupted. And he kneels down in front of him. He looks at him. He sees his heart. He sees his whole story. He just knows that this man has been here for a lifetime. He sees his pain, his shame, and his whole story. And then he asks, "Do you want to be made well?" And now my first reaction to that is always this. And I'm pretty sure I've told you this before. But my first reaction to that every time I read this story is, what a dumb question. Because of course he does, Jesus. He's been there for 38 years. That's why he's by the pool. He literally just told you that's what's up. And you're asking, hey, do you want to be healed? But then, when I calm down and regulate, I had this whole conversation with God. And the conversation always goes something like this. I calm down. God looks at me and says, "Are you finished?" I say, "Yes, sorry, that was an overreaction." And then God says, "Well, maybe he asked him that question on purpose." And I say, "What possible purpose could that have? What's the reason?" And then God does that thing where God gets all therapist-y and just looks at me, waiting for me to figure out the answer to my own question. You know the look they give, just like, "Oh, you sweet thing." And then I begin to put the pieces together because I have the answer inside of me. I just need to slow my roll and think for a minute. And then I eventually figure out what Jesus knew and what God, of course, knew, and that maybe that is the best question that Jesus could ask the guy. Do you want to be made well? And now before we get into that, let's just pull over here for a second and do something that feels important to do. When we talk about healing, and we talk about healing in the Bible, I know how tempting it is for us to want to talk about physical healing and biological healing, being healed from sickness and being healed from bodily ailments and injuries. I get all that. Because not only are so many stories in the Bible, if not all of the stories in the Bible, about physical healings, but it's also cool and fun and amazing and wondrous. And it lets us go, look how cool God is. He's so big and powerful. He just healed that guy who can't walk or can't see. Wow, it's amazing. And I get all that. That's really compelling stuff. But here's the rub. And I want to kind of pump the brakes here. And I want to park the whole physical healing conversation in the back lot somewhere. I don't want to talk about it today. And I don't want to talk about it because, to be honest, when it comes to God healing our physical bodies, when it comes to God answering our prayers to heal our cancers and our ailments, when it comes to those wondrous and miraculous kinds of things, I just end up doing this. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to handle that. I don't know how to talk about that. I don't want to do spiritual malpractice by setting up us into a corner that we can't get out of. Because for every one story I hear of that happening, which I believe and I trust, I hear 1,000 stories of that not happening, which I believe and trust. But I also don't want to say it can't happen because God's God and I don't know. But I think we're entering into some really dangerous territory by exclusively talking about those things. And so with your permission, actually I don't need it, but we're going to do it anyways. We're going to park that. This is going to be a one-on-one conversation. We're going to park that in the back. And instead, I want to talk about a different kind of healing. I want to talk about a healing that can happen, a kind of healing that I know happens, one that we can talk about, a healing that I think is actually way cooler, more wondrous, and more amazing than the physical healings. And also the kind of healing that Jesus is actually up to in all of the physical healings that we see in the Bible. And so with all of that parked out there and zooming out to a bigger perspective on the whole thing, here's what I want to say healing is. Here's how I want to offer you to hold it and understand it. When we talk about healing, when we're exploring what Jesus the healer is up to, we're talking about the invitation to wholeness. We're talking about the movement towards becoming whole. That's what healing is. It's the movement towards wholeness. It is less about undoing the things that have happened to us and more about becoming whole enough to live fully. It is less about returning to how things used to be in the ways that you were and more about the courage to live fully despite those things. That's what healing is. It's the movement towards wholeness. And so maybe we can begin to see how we're transcending the physical and we're talking about things like our wounds. We're talking about things like our trauma. We're talking about things like shame. We're talking about your worst days ever. We're talking about those things that we carry around. Those things that are locked in our basements that we know are there and they make us feel stuck. Like we can't move. Kind of like we're sitting on a mat for 38 years just watching life pass us by and pass us by, but we can't do anything about it because we can't move because of what has happened. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Yeah, it's a much more universal understanding of healing. Healing is about what do we do with all that? What do we do with those things? The stuff that changes how we see our worth and our value. Those narratives that change how we see ourselves and see others. Those things that keep us small and stuck and not being able to move on. That's the stuff that we're talking about today. I want to talk about all of that. Because the answer is not in leaving it behind, not in belittling it, not in erasing it, not in pretending it doesn't exist. But moving into something new despite it. And here's the rub, a beautiful but hard rub, but also because of it. What healing is, it's moving into wholeness, not just despite those things, but because of those things. And finding a life that is whole, that's integrated, that's accepted, that's transformed. It's about getting to that place where we can say something really powerful and beautiful. Something really liberating. where we can say, this is my story, and I really wish it never happened. I would hate it to happen to anybody else, but it happened. I've accepted it, and I am still loved. I am still worthy, and I am still valued, and I am not going to live a life defined by that, but I'm going to live my life fully despite that. I can still live a life that is deep and rich and full and beautiful. Healing is getting there to the point where you can say that. And if you've ever gotten to say that, you know how powerful that place is, right? You know how freeing it is to realize, oh, I've accepted those things. And maybe I haven't moved on, but I've integrated it. Those things aren't driving anymore. I'm at peace with it. They don't define me anymore. Oh, wow. It's different. It's different. I can get up. I can walk. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. And what all these stories of Jesus the healer do is tell us something really, 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 really important. Something about who God is and something about the nature of the universe that we live in. And that's healing is possible. Healing is possible. And just take a moment to let that sink in, because the voices in our head are going to go off right now and be like, no, they're not. That's not possible. I've been rumbling with this thing for years. Yeah, I know. I get it. But healing is possible. New life is possible. Something new can happen because we have a God who doesn't just want us to have something new, but we have a God who moves towards us, kneels down in front of us, sees us, and asks, do you want to be made well? Do you want something new? I want it. Do you want it? That's the kind of God that we have. We live in a world where healing is possible. Because in each one of these stories, the one that we heard and all the others, what's Jesus actually doing? Because I think there's more going on in these things other than just the physical healing. What is he giving the people back? What is he gifting to all those people that he heals and meets? What's actually happening? He's giving them back their dignity. He's giving them back their purpose, their value, their worth, their community. He's giving them back hope. What he's doing in each and every one of those stories is not just physical, but it's spiritual. He's moving them back into wholeness. He's giving them their life back. He's telling them, oh, you don't need to live like this. It doesn't need to be this way. You can have something new because new life is possible. That's the kind of God that I am. Which takes us back to the question. What's up with Jesus' question? What do we do with that? And the reason it's a brilliant question is because while God makes healing possible, we're the ones that have to do the work. Right? Well, God will offer her hand up to pick us up. We're the ones that have to stand up and actually walk. We're the ones who have to encounter the people that say, that's not who you are. You're breaking the rules. I thought you were like this, and now you're like this. What's up? Those are the moments where we have to say, yeah, this is who I am. I'm healed. I am whole. I'm not that person anymore. That's how change works. We are the people who have to say yes to God's invitation to be healed. And here's why that's important. And I want to end with a story. I want to end with a story that kind of helps us figure out why Jesus asks that question and what we do with it. And so a while back, 5 years or so, my life was doing that really interesting thing that life can do where it explodes and implodes all at once. You know that feeling? It's quite mystical to see. And I was sitting on my couch and I was reflecting on a conversation my therapist and I had had. And one of the things she realized, I eventually picked it up because we had that whole like, oh, you poor thing conversation. She helped me see that one of the reasons my life was imploding and exploding all at once was because I, inside of me, have the nice guy. And the nice guy, I was realizing, was actually a really bad guy. Because the nice guy always just wants to be liked. And he will do anything to be liked and appreciated and seen as good, including lie, deceive, manipulate, image manage, get out of things, anything to be liked. And all of those consequences had added up to the point where my life blew up. And I was sitting in the shambles of it being like, oh, okay, I see what happened, I get it, okay. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna kill the nice guy. And so I had a funeral for my nice guy. I drew a picture of him, I cut it out. I wrote a eulogy for him, and I went into the backyard as it was snowing out, as like a beautiful evening for it. And I had a whole funeral for my nice guy. I was like, I am so self-aware. Look at me doing all this good work. I felt really good. I could feel myself being healed as I lit that paper on fire and watched him die in front of me. And I went to bed, slept great, woke up the next morning, and my ex called and she said, I think it was something to do with the dogs. And I didn't do it. But the nice guy, he showed up. And he was like, just lie to her. You can do it later. She won't know. And you'll look amazing. Do the thing, just say, yeah, I did the thing I promised I would do. I was like, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead. And so I went back to my therapist's office. And I was like, the weirdest thing happened. And I told her the whole story. And she's like, let me get this straight. You tried to kill him. And that was your answer to this situation. I'm like, yeah. And again, she does a therapist thing where she's like, oh dear. And she looks at me and says, I remember this so vividly. She's like, Nick, what do you believe about God? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, what's God's MO? How does God always work? What is the most powerful force in the universe? What's the thing you teach every single week? I'm like, love? She's like, yeah. You can't hate your way into healing. You can't force your way into healing. You can't murder your way into new life. And it's funny now, but back then it changed everything. And it helped me understand why Jesus asks us that question. Because when it comes to the parts of us, when it comes to our wounds or the difficult people in our life, or even zoom out in the world, we default into violence. We default into force, into power. And we just shove things down, or we manipulate, or we oppress, we force. And that we think, because it makes sense, that will result in new life. That will get me into healing. That will make me whole. But the truth is, it doesn't work. It only makes things worse. It always comes back. And the reason Jesus asks us, do you want to be made well, is because we only heal through love. You only heal when you love. And love is something that we have to receive. You have to let it go in. We have to say yes to it. Not just once, but again and again and again. And it was only through loving my nice guy and seeing what he actually wanted, that he would stop driving the car. It was only through loving the people around you that are difficult that you can actually have compassion and see them as humans and maybe mend the relationship. It is only through being kind, through being compassionate with yourself and others, that you can heal. In every single moment, we need to hear the question that God asks us. Hey, do you want to be made well? And we say, yes. Yes. And we can stand up and we can walk, knowing that we don't walk alone, but God goes with us every step of the way. So this time is going to be for you. Because I know, and you know, that we all have stuff going on inside of us. We all have wounds that still hurt. We all have baggage that we carry. There's always someone in our life that we're just so hateful over. And if the vision God has for us is wholeness, I want to invite you into a time of healing, of saying yes to the question that we're all being asked. Do you want to be made well? Do you want me to help fix it? And I invite you to use this time to say yes. Knowing that it involves work, that it involves time, it involves patience, but remembering that healing happens, that new life is possible, and that you can step into something new. So there's some candles in the back. There's some candles up here in the transept. There's some people in the back who would love to pray for you. Maybe you can just sit, listen to the song. You can sing along with the song. Do whatever you need to do. But use this to hear the question. Use this to find the courage to say, yes, I want to be made well. And may you step out into the new life that is waiting for you. And so, my friends, healing is possible. You just got to say yes. May grace and peace be with you. Amen.